Me now is West Virginia Republican Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. General, great to have you here. Let me first talk about this infrastructure bill, because there are a lot of things we want to get to here. We just had, I think you heard Bernie Sanders suggesting that dentistry is now a part of infrastructure. What are your thoughts about the way the Democrats have exploded the definition of infrastructure?
Look, I think it's been a very reckless administration from a tax and spend perspective. And if folks weren't so greedy, there could be a reasonable bipartisan infrastructure package that everyone could agree with. And I know one of our home state senators, Senator Capito, tried in good faith to get something done. I think people should look and say, look, we know the traditional definition of infrastructure, roads and bridges and airports, internet infrastructure. When you can look at that, keep it to that level, I think you could get a very popular bill. The one thing, though, I want to warn people about, we know that the other side's going to try to slip in something related to the energy standards, which would allow Biden to move his climate change policy forward. We have to guard against that. That cannot be part of the final package, and I'm urging every Republican senator to be on the lookout. They're going to try to slide it in.
By the way, I'm not surprised that the AG of West Virginia would have something to say about climate change and all of the money that is going into that. What is happening with your state and concerns about the war on fossil fuels from this administration?
Well, we're deeply concerned, but one thing I want to do is I want to mention that we had a major victory the other night with respect to the Biden oil and gas lease initiative, and 13 states got together, led by Louisiana. It's a great start because you're going to see Republican AGs coming together on a wide variety of these energy initiatives. Here in West Virginia, we have a case that we filed to be heard up at the U.S. Supreme Court, and this is fundamental because the Biden administration wants to give the EPA almighty power and authority. We're not going to let that happen. A lot of people in West Virginia are deeply concerned by the speed in which this administration is moving to not only wipe out coal, but cut natural gas capacity in half, move 100 million people over to the power grid, electric cars. This is a very radical proposal, and it's going to cause the average citizen of West Virginia to pay a lot more at the power grid. So we're very worried about that, and we're going to be in court. We're going to stop them.
Yeah, let me switch to inflation and the labor shortage that we have in America right now, those 9.3 million unfilled jobs that a lot of small businesses just can't get the workers because they're paid so much for staying at home, or at least that's what the theory goes. The administration says that's not the cause, but a lot of people look at it, talk to businesses, and say that certainly is the cause. You say we need to re-incentivize work. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think one of the things that we know that failed with respect to some of the COVID policies have gone through is that if people are given so much money that they lack the incentive to go to work, that's a real problem. And I was actually very pleased that our governor and many others ended the $300 extra payment, because we all know that there should be resources for those who need it most if you have a physical or a mental disability. But we want to get people back to work, and that means keeping the timeline tighter, having lower money. There should be more incentive to go to work at a restaurant, to work at many of the great jobs that are out there. And there are a ton available in West Virginia right now, than to sit at home and collect a check. And I think we have to make sure that we don't have a renewal of that kind of disastrous policy, because it directly impacted the workforce here in West Virginia.
So you are one of those states that are rejecting the $300 supplement from the federal government. We just had a Democrat governor do the same from Louisiana. So now 26 states. Do you think this is a trend that will continue? Because they are going to, the president said they're going to be eliminated by the end of summer, but that leaves so much of the summer that businesses, particularly small ones, were hoping to use to get back into business after all the lockdowns.
Look, I do think that the message that has been sent resoundingly in West Virginia, across the country, is you have to change these incentives, and the sooner they go away, the better. Recently, I traveled across West Virginia, met with many small businessmen. I had a group of about 10 people in the room. There were 440 available jobs just with those people, but they were struggling to lure people in. The bottom line is we need to get every able-bodied American back to work as quickly as possible, and the sooner some of these bad incentives get removed, the better.
I have to ask about a member of the other party, the Democrat Party, who's also from West Virginia. You know him better than most people do, Senator Manchin.
Sure.
Senator Manchin claims that he is going to vote down the move to end the filibuster. That is, he wants the filibuster to remain. If you get rid of the filibuster, you're probably going to have a tremendous increase in spending from what we already have, because President Biden would get so much of his agenda through. Do you believe Senator Manchin when he says he will stand against a change in the filibuster?
Well, I'm rooting for him to stick to his word, and I've talked to him about that. I think it's really critical that we hold the line here in West Virginia, and I've asked Senator Manchin to do that, and so far he's responded. So as long as he keeps doing the right thing, I think we should thank him, and then we should proceed. But let's make no mistake about it. If you get rid of the filibuster, you're talking about D.C. statehood. You're talking about a very radical H.R. 1. You're talking about radical climate change legislation.
Packing the Supreme
Medicare
Court.
for all. It's just unbelievable. Oh, the list goes on. And I think Senator Manchin understands that those don't represent West Virginia values. And that's why I'm hopeful he'll continue to do the right thing.
Very quickly, if Senator Manchin folds on the filibuster, will he hold his office in West Virginia?
I'm just going to keep asking him to step up and to hold the line on the filibuster. Just keep doing it. And that's my position right now. I think there's plenty of time to deal with electoral politics later, but let's let people govern. And so far, he's held the line. Let's keep giving him positive reassurance.
Attorney General Morrisey, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.